I call this meeting of the Committee on Public Safety, Finance, and Policy to order. We do have a quorum present. The first order of business is to approve the minutes from the last meeting. Representative Moller, would you like to move for approval of the minutes for March 28th, 2023?
Yes, Madam Chair, I would move the approval of minutes from our last meeting last Tuesday.
All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion prevails and the minutes are approved. Members, today we will move adoption of the DE amendment to House File 2890 and take action on numerous amendments that have been submitted. This is the same DE that the committee walked through on Tuesday, and since we heard public testimony on Tuesday, we will not be taking any further testimony today. My plan is to keep the gavel as we work through the amendments. So first, I will move that House File 2890 be re-referred to the Committee on Ways and Means. I will now move the DE1 amendment. The DE1 amendment contains the provisions that make up the House Public Safety, Finance, and Policy Bill. And before we vote and discuss the DE1 amendment, we'll talk about the amendments to the DE1. The first amendment I will move is the A18 amendment. This is the author's amendment, and I will have House Counsel, I believe Mr. Johnson is going to walk through that amendment. Mr. Johnson.
Madam Chair, members, Ben Johnson with House Research. Briefly, the amendment moves the Fusion Center report and the public safety radio grants out from underneath emergency management. They should have been under the BCA and emergency communications networks, respectively. It changes some of the language in the Ramsey County Violence Prevention Grants. It now matches language that was in House File 600. It adds some reporting requirements to grants for prosecutor training and for the Violence Project. It makes changes to the description of the report on illicit drug use. It inserts some details on the grant for supportive arts. That's a grant to the Department of Corrections. The appropriation was in the bill. The policy language was not. It's been inserted now. It makes some changes to the body camera policy language that addresses concerns that were raised about the interaction between this new policy and some other portions of the Data Practices Act. And then it makes some technical corrections and conforming changes. Madam Chair, that's the extent of the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Any discussion to the A18 amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion prevails and the A18 amendment is adopted. Next, we will take up the A6 amendment. Who will be offering the A6 amendment? We can delay. We'll delay it. That's fine. Just remind. I'm making a note for staff to remind me to. We'll circle back to that one. Yep. Okay. So the next amendment then will be the A9 A9 amendment, and I believe Vice Chair Feist would like to move and explain the amendment. Vice Chair Feist.
Yep. Thank you, Madam Chair. So the A9 amendment essentially is adding House File 1838 to our bill. It is the probation bill. So it first incorporates the new formula that was agreed upon amongst the stakeholders providing community supervision and probation in Minnesota. So the formula is a base amount, and I think, I don't know how much detail you want, so I'll keep it high level, but happy to answer any questions. But basically, it's a base amount that will ensure continuity of funding and adequate funding into the future. And then there's also a capitated rate that is based upon the risk levels of the people being supervised and also some collected data on the cost of probation, such as training, cognitive skills group, how many employees are needed. So that is the formula. Notably, this version of the bill, with agreement between all stakeholders, is going to separate out the funding for the tribes who are going to be brought into the delivery systems. And that was decided because we can have a better understanding of what those costs will be before we incorporate them into the formula. There are a lot of conforming changes, which is why it's so long. And then also this incorporates the policy provisions of House File 1838, including relating to the elimination of supervision fees, updates to the treatment of the first occurrence of certain technical violations. It adds the Targeted Innovation Fund that was recommended by the Council of State Governments. So those are the policy provisions. And then in addition, finally, it just incorporates some DOC policy changes as well that were added in on the Senate side that we are also incorporating here. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Vice Chair Feist. Any discussion to the A9 amendment? All right, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion prevails and the A9 amendment is adopted. I see that we have Representative Whitty with us now, so we will circle back, Representative Whitty, to the A6 amendment. It's my understanding that you would like to you'd like to move and explain that amendment. Representative Whitty.
Thank you, Chair Moller, and sorry for being late. The A6 deletes new language on peace officer body-worn camera recordings release. I move to amend House File number 2890 that delete everything amended. Current law already has sound data classifications. Current law already requires law enforcement agencies to have release policies. The law enforcement associations have concerns with the new language, especially with the inflammatory redacted no more than what is required by law. And agencies are already releasing videos as soon as practical without compromising an investigation.
Thank you. Representative Frazier to the A6.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Whitty, appreciate the offer of the amendment. I am going to have to ask my members to vote no on this amendment. This is actually a compromise. This is for over the last 2.5 years now working with the BCA, who conducts these investigations, to get to a point where we could release data where it wouldn't have an impact on the investigation. As well, it has a provision that allows for that data to not be released if it would have an impact on that investigation. And it gives family members the ability to appeal that if possible. Again, it's a compromise. It provides for a date release time that's certain. I think that's why we have we have a lot of the angst now, is because even though there may be departments that have policies on release, there are often times where that release is it takes a little bit longer than in other occasions. And what we're seeing in the community is that the longer it takes, the more concern rises, the more angst rises, and then we start to have issues, and those issues have an impact on the relationship with law enforcement in the community. And we're trying to facilitate as best we can better relationships.
Thank you. Further discussion to the amendment.
Chair Moller.
Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Chair Moller. And I appreciate Representative Frazier's remarks and the concerns, but I don't know if we've had a situation that the current laws have been a problem. I don't know of a single situation where an agency has not got the information out that would be altered by this new amendment or this new law and changing these things. As Representative Whitty said, I believe that we have good statutes, good data collection, good data privacy already in place, and I think we're fixing something that doesn't need to be broke. And with all due respect, for there to be compromise, there needs to be more than one side into the conversation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
And Chair, I'd like a roll call.
Okay, sure. We'll do a roll call. Representative Frazier.
I don't know who the one side is because I wasn't talking to myself during these conversations. Representative Novotny, yet most recently there's a situation in a local jurisdiction here in the metro where data was requested on the death of an individual, and it took almost a year before that data was released. Again, caused quite a bit of angst within the community, and again, furthered those divides and distrust between the community and law enforcement. And so we do have examples in real time and most recently, and those are the things that we're trying to avoid with this time certain release. And again, working closely with those who do the investigations to ensure that the investigations are not interfered with.
Okay. Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Chair Moller. I am familiar with the situation I believe you are referring to, and I believe that situation started 3 years ago. And the provisions and the time limits in this wouldn't have changed that unless I'm reading it wrong. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Back to the author of the amendment, Representative Whitty.
Thank you. I do appreciate the discussion on it. My only concern is that we do have the law, that if we do put a timestamp on it, we're doing maybe the opposite by getting it out there too quickly before all the information is out there. A lot of times in these cases, the information is great. I do agree that law enforcement can be more transparent with that. But words do matter in some of this stuff, and the videos can also help with it. So by going too quickly could have unintended consequences. But I do appreciate the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. A roll call has been requested. The clerk will take the roll on the A6 amendment.
Chair Moller,
No.
Vice Chair Feist,
No.
Lead Novotny,
Yes.
Representative Becker-Finn,
No.
Representative Curran,
No.
Representative Engen,
Yes.
Representative Frazier,
No.
Representative Grossel,
Yes.
Representative Hollins,
No.
Representative Hudson,
Yes.
Representative Hewitt,
No.
Representative Mueller,
Mueller votes yes.
Representative Pinto,
No.
Representative Tabke,
No.
Representative Whitty.
Yes.
There being 6 ayes and 9 nays, the motion does not prevail and the A6 amendment is not adopted. The next amendment on our list is the A11 amendment. Who will be offering the A11 amendment? Representative Mueller.
Things are jumping all over the place. Thank you, Madam Chair. All right. Let me just get my things together. Thank you for your indulgence, Madam Chair. Everything's just kind of all over the place. Oh, for Pete's sake. We are. Okay, so for this amendment, we are looking at the Ramsey County Juvenile Youth Treatment Homes. And the omnibus contains an appropriation for the Ramsey County to establish a therapeutic treatment home for juveniles, which is good. The language says that the homes can be secure. We heard testimony that juveniles who would be placed in these homes have committed some pretty violent crimes like carjacking and assault. And while we want to help juveniles become good citizens, community safety has to be forefront. And so we would ask for this amendment that instead of having can, that we would insert must, that they must be secure.
Thank you. Vice Chair Feist to the A11.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the use of the permissive can was intentional because we know that in certain circumstances that having a secure facility is actually detrimental to the interests of the youth. And so in a lot of cases, the access to a secure facility will be important and helpful, but using this language just allows Ramsey County to also ensure that if there is a need, and in fact, we actually amended the language from what we heard in committee to make it youth be able to be diverted to these therapeutic treatment centers at an earlier phase. So some of these are interventions at an earlier phase. And so we just need to make sure that they have the ability to make these non-secure facilities if they think that's in the best interest of that youth population. So I would urge the members to vote no.
Thank you. Further discussion to the A11 amendment.
Representative Moller.
Lead Novotny.
Requesting a roll call, please.
Okay, roll call has been requested. Did you want to speak further to the amendment or no?
No, ma'am. I believe it speaks for itself.
All right. Closing comments on the amendment, Representative Mueller.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Feist. I understand completely what you're talking about having the permissive. However, we need to make sure that the interventions that you are asking us, that you're asking the facility to do actually are happening. And, you know, people who, some of the youth especially, who are doing some of these crimes, I mean, there is an ability to be swayed to do other things that would be outside of the building. And so it needs to be important. It needs to be a priority that they're in the place they need to be to get the treatment that they need. And so I would request that you would support the amendment. Thank you.
A roll call having been requested, the clerk will take the roll on the A11 amendment.
Chair Moller,
No.
Vice Chair Feist,
No.
Lead Novotny. Yes. Representative Becker-Finn,
No.
Representative Curran,
No.
Representative Engen,
Yes.
Representative Frazier,
No.
Representative Grossel.
Yes.
Representative Hollins,
No.
Representative Hudson,
Yes.
Representative Hewitt,
No.
Representative Mueller,
Mueller votes yes.
Representative Pinto,
No.
Representative Tabke,
No.
Representative Whitty.
Yes.
There being 6 ayes and 9 nays, the motion does not prevail and the A11 amendment is not adopted. Next, we'll be taking up the A3 amendment. Who will be offering that amendment? Lee Novotny.
Thank you, Chair Moller. This amendment is to add clarification to take away the ambiguity of the current language that has been added into the bill of a reasonable amount of time and replace it with a solid standard. The purpose of a knock and announce warrant is not for the people that are inside the residence or business that the warrant is being served on to become fully awakened and dress and do their hair before they answer the door. The purpose of the knock and announce warrant is for anyone that is in the facility of the door to be able to unlock it if they're available and to not be in the way of the door if it's breached. We're looking to give something solid, and I don't know a good number. Originally, when the bill came out, it was 30 seconds, which if you've ever been standing at a door, having some idea what you're possibly facing on the other side of the door, 30 seconds is a long time. And just the not specific reference is the problem. And it will be the delight of the defense attorneys. For the defense attorneys that are on, or for the lawyers that have been prosecutors on the other side of the table, if we use a reference of the DWI's laws right now, where you have a reasonable amount of time to contact an attorney before making a decision about testing in a DWI case. What is a reasonable amount of time? That depends on the judge you get and how hard the defense attorney wants to push. I once had an implied consent hearing on a DWI arrest I made on Christmas Day. I allowed the person over an hour to contact an attorney, and she did not get a responding call or a call back from any attorney. And I was surprised when the judge, who I had butted heads with several times, made a decision from the bench, which he never did. He always took it under advisement, and said, it was Christmas Day. You could have called for 3 hours, you weren't going to get a call back, and ruled in favor of the state. And I bring that reference up to think that we should have hard numbers in the same way that we used to have a night-capped warrant or a non-night-capped search warrant would be able to be executed from sunrise to sunset, as opposed to just putting a hard number on it. And then we didn't have to decide what was sunset that day with the reference of Minneapolis minus how many miles west of Minneapolis or east of Minneapolis you were. Let's be specific. 10 seconds is plenty of time. And Madam Chair, I request a roll call.
Thank you. Representative Curran to the A3 amendment.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Lead Novotny. I appreciate where you're coming from on this. I will just say I will be asking members to vote no on this amendment, and the reason is there is a long-standing precedent in the judicial system and courts to evaluate what reasonableness is in a situation based on the totality of circumstances. That's something that has been practiced for a long time, and it has proven to hold its weight. And my intention with this bill is that it does hold its weight over time. And so that's one of the reasons that I chose to take that time limit actually fully out of there. I would add, too, that I feel like placing any amount of time in there could be a significant disadvantage to law enforcement to have to wait until a certain point, because we know that something could happen in 8 or 9 seconds. Now, understanding that there are exigent circumstances that would immediately void that warrant in that situation. If you have reason to believe that somebody heard you articulate that you're there, then you should be able to go into that and execute that search warrant, again, based on the totality of circumstances. So I'm asking for a no because I don't think no situation has the same timeline.
Representative Whitty.
Thank you, Chair Moller. Representative Curran, I appreciate your thought process on that last part about exigent circumstances, because on one measure, on my A6 amendment, we're trying to put a definite time frame, and on this one, we're not. And I think we're going to have some unintended consequences because they're going to view that reasonable time frame and what's reasonable for one. I do think the articulation part would be really important, but people might not see it always that way and said they should have waited or backed off. So it's really going to call into question our law enforcement officer. And I will tell you, being someone that's been on that other side of the door, and we are trained from day one that doorway is the fatal tunnel, and you don't want to be sitting in there too long. And so the minute you knock, you're really not going anywhere. So the longer we keep them there, that's why I thought the 10 seconds was reasonable. But I appreciate your thoughts on if you can articulate, it might go shorter, because I think people are going to interpret it differently. The person on that door might think 5 seconds is reasonable, and someone else might think that it should have been a minute to 2 minutes. Thank you.
Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with Representative Curran's comments, and I guess I feel like the end of the comments just made reinforced, too, that it may be that 10 seconds is, in fact, too long, that it's not reasonable. It may be that that a longer amount of time is reasonable. In my experience, I've charged many DWIs, and I've never had the experience of having there be a problem with the person being given a reasonable amount of time. That has not come up. As Representative Curran said, courts interpret this kind of thing all the time in assessing the reasonableness of a given amount of time or given situation. And I, too, would worry that having some particular number of seconds we put in actually causes more problems than it solves. We've got a lot of experience in our system of using this kind of standard, and I think we should leave it in the bill. Thank you.
Representative Engen.
Thank you, Chair Moller. Representative Pinto, to your point, courts may have a longstanding precedent of reviewing whether or not that was a reasonable amount of time, but officers in the moment don't. They don't get hindsight. So that's why I'll be supporting this amendment, and thank you for bringing it forward.
Thank you. And I'll just note that officers make that reasonableness determination all the time. In order to stop a car, an officer has to have a reasonable expectation of privacy. So this is something that is very much baked into their practice and our law. Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just chime in to highlight what seems to be a discordance in premise. Because the entire point of banning the no-knock warrants was premised on the idea that we can't trust judges to give officers this discretion, and it is discretion, as we noted during member discussion of that bill. You know, in that time period, I forget the exact months and years, but it was like a 5-month time period. There were 70 no-knock warrants issued, and only 49 of them were executed as no-knock warrants. That means that discretion was being used in the moment by officers. That discretion was granted them by a judge who was, before the fact, looking at evidence presented and determining that a no-knock warrant was justified. We're saying we can't trust that process at all. That's the whole point of this language even existing in the bill. And so we're going to remove that option, and now we're saying that we can trust, however, the same people who we couldn't trust to issue a no-knock warrant to determine what is and isn't reasonable after the fact when they weren't there and don't know what's going on. This is an inversion of premises, and the point made regarding having flexibility to go less than 10 seconds. That's a great argument for not having this bill in the first place. But it certainly acknowledges the point that the people who need to be making the decisions are the people who are entrusted by the public to enforce the law at the scene, not folks reviewing after the fact what was and wasn't reasonable in a scenario that they were not present for. Thank you.
Representative Frazier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to respond to Representative Hudson. The comments. I've been here for a little bit now. It's my second term, and I've been following it for a while. I don't think the premise has ever been that we don't trust our judges to make their objective decision about whether or not to grant the warrant. The premise has been, and I think Representative Curran may speak to this more, it's been about what's the best way to protect law enforcement and the individuals that they're going to serve that warrant on. That, in my mind, remains the premise here, is how do we protect our officers that are serving these warrants and also the individuals that they're being served on.
Representative Grassel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll go back to what I testified before. When an attorney testifies to something, I take your word that you know what you're talking about. And when we're talking from a law enforcement aspect of this, these are not handed out like candy, no-knock warrants. And if you've ever stood at the threshold of one of those doors on a high-risk search warrant, then you'll understand. You'll understand. 10 seconds is a long damn time. I'm here to tell you. And the reason that these no-knock warrants are applied for is because you have articulated in your application that there is a need for safety. There is a need to hit that door without knocking, without announcement, because there is an articulated danger on the other side of that door. Either the suspect is armed, or you're searching for a murder suspect, or you're searching for somebody who has committed a heinous crime, has committed a bad crime, and they are armed. And you have articulated in that application you have this short window within the last 72 hours that this is what is in here. This is what we believe is in here. So it's not, good grief. Each search warrant, you have to make a threshold assessment anyway, when you get to that door. Do we have to continue? Or if you get new information that says back out, then you back out. It is not, getting rid of no-knock search warrants, in my opinion, is trying to fix something that doesn't need fixing, that's not broken. If you have a bunch of these being applied for and being signed by judges, then you better look at what's going on in your communities to see why is this need? Why are these needed? Why are we having so many of these signed? And our crime rate should answer that question a lot for everybody. To give an officer 10 seconds at the door, that's not asking too much. That's not asking too much. A reasonable amount of time you try to take something like that and try to defend something like that, that's asking too much. That leaves it open to a lot of different interpretation. So when you're getting testimony from people who have had to do these, who have actually written these things in the field and actually had to execute these things, I wish you'd listen. And you heard the testimony from other officers who have come up here and asked, please work with us on this. So I support the amendment.
And just to clarify, we're talking about the bill that has to do with search warrants, not arrest warrants, not hot pursuits, exigent circumstances. And so we're talking about search warrants for evidence, search warrants for evidence. Representative Curran.
Thank you, Chair, and I appreciate the conversation so far, and I thank you for noting that we are talking about search warrants, not arrest warrants. I had a note to make sure that was clear here, and I also I'm a bit alarmed at the misunderstanding of reasonableness when we're talking about public safety. It is a huge component of your education when you become a police officer, that you fully understand how this works, how reasonableness is assessed in the court system. And I will actually agree with a point that was made, that we should trust the folks at the scene, meaning that we shouldn't necessarily make that decision at this table. So again, that is why I've taken the time limit off. I don't think any time limit is appropriate because we should trust the folks at the scene. We have been able to trust our process, and so I'm still recommending a no vote.
Back to the author of the amendment, Lead Novotny.
Thank you, Chair Moller. I just want to be perfectly clear here. The last thing I ever wanted to do was to be forced to put a number on what is a reasonable amount of time. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds. That's the last thing I wanted to do. But given the stakes that are involved in the provisions that we have included in this bill with the suppression of evidence, there's probably law firms right now that are writing the seminars that will be the blueprints and the boilerplate appeal of cases based on the substantial, a reasonable amount of time. That's going to be the go-to on every search warrant. There's so much involved. Everything, every case, every search warrant will be appealed based on it wasn't a reasonable amount of time. Yes, it will. I came up with this number as begrudgingly as I can, just based on the fact that if we're going to ask these officers to stand in that door and go through that funnel and make decisions and be exposed to the risk based on decisions that other people have made them make, that at least it's not in vain, and that evidence and anything gained as part of that investigation isn't put at risk and they're lost. The secondary issues of all the court fights and the overtime and testifying what's reasonable, those are all secondary. You can have a perfectly good search warrant with a good basis, and there will be a law firm that will say it wasn't a reasonable amount of time, and that's what the whole case will revolve around. Let's not make, and let's be clear, it's not just the officers that are exposed. I fully acknowledge the fact that everyone involved is in this high-risk dynamic entries are exposed. Let's at least not let the work go to vain. And Madam Chair, I request a roll call.
Thank you. Roll call has been requested. The clerk will take the roll on the A3 amendment.
Chair Moller,
No.
Vice Chair Feist,
No.
Lead Novotny,
Yes.
Representative Becker-Finn,
No.
Representative Curran,
No.
Representative Engen,
Yes.
Representative Frazier,
No.
Representative Grossel,
Yes.
Representative Hollins,
No.
Representative Hudson,
Yes.
Representative Hewitt,
No.
Representative Mueller,
Mueller votes yes.
Representative Pinto,
No.
Representative Tabke,
No.
Representative Whitty.
Yes.
There being 6 ayes and 9 nays, the motion does not prevail and the A3 amendment is not adopted. The next amendment on the list will be not a surprise to anyone. It's the A4 amendment. Who's going to be offering the A4?
Madam Chair, we withdraw.
The A4 amendment has been withdrawn. All right, we will now move to the A1 amendment. Who is offering the A1 amendment? Representative Hudson to the A1.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The A1 would provide for the reopening of expunged records in the event that the subject of those records is convicted of a subsequent felony. And the rationale for this is that, well, let's go to the rationale of why we're expunging records. The stated rationale for why we're expunging records is in order to facilitate that person reintegrating, rehabilitating, rejoining society in a productive fashion. If that's what they're doing, fantastic, good. But once they've demonstrated that that's not what they're doing, which a felony conviction certainly demonstrates, then there's no further reason, there's no ongoing reason to continue to grant them that favor of continuing to have their past records sealed from public view. So what this would do is it would actually, I would maintain, balance the intention here to where we're saying this is something that we are granting you expungement as a recognition of good behavior. Well, if it's not ongoing good behavior, then we shouldn't be allowing them to benefit from the recognition of good behavior. So I would ask members to vote for this, and I would request a roll call.
All right, a roll call has been requested. Thank you for the amendment, Representative Hudson. I'm going to be suggesting a no vote on this amendment for a few reasons. This is part of the Clean Slate Act, as you recognized, and expungement's part of that. But our current statutes already apply for expungements in some situations, and this exception that you want to put in isn't part of the current statutory scheme. Talking to the advocates for this, we are unaware of anywhere in the country that has something like this, and it wasn't considered by the work group who have worked for years on this Clean Slate Act. I'll also just note that the current expungement statutes have a number of exceptions when these records will still be available to law enforcement, to prosecutors, to some of the different licensing agencies. So those exceptions are already baked in. And so for all of those reasons, again, I'll be requesting a no vote on this. Further discussion on the A1 amendment? Lead Novotny.
Thank you, Chair Moller. I just want to push back a little bit on the anywhere else in the country. We as a legislative body have already done numerous bills over long nights that no one else in the country is doing, and I don't see that as a basis for passing legislation. Thank you, Chair.
Any further discussion? Closing comments, Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this isn't the first time in the chamber when during the course of legislative deliberation amongst people with election certificates, it's been suggested that because some other group decided how things are going to go down, that we have to abide by them, whoever they are. And I just don't think that's in line with the intention of the deliberative process of our democratic republic. But that being as it may, I would also point out that saying that it's unprecedented to do something that is in response to something that is itself unprecedented is an interesting argument. And again, if the intention of expunging the record is to facilitate, to incentivize, and to recognize good behavior, then it should be a no-brainer that in the event of a subsequent violation of public trust, being convicted of a felony is a pretty big violation of public trust, and it's a pretty big indication of bad behavior. So taking away the gold star of expungement as recognition of the fact that you are reneging on the deal, you're reneging on the social contract, is not too much to ask. So I would request members to vote for this. Thank you.
Thank you. A roll call has been requested. The clerk will take the roll on the A1 amendment.
Chair Moller,
No.
Vice Chair Feist,
No.
Lead Novotny. Yes. Representative Becker-Finn,
No.
Representative Curran,
No.
Representative Engen. Yes. Representative Frazier,
No.
Representative Grossel.
Yes.
Representative Hollins.
No.
Representative Hudson,
Yes.
Representative Hewitt,
No.
Representative Mueller,
Mueller votes yes.
Representative Pinto,
No.
Representative Tabke,
No.
Representative Whitty.
Yes.
There being 6 ayes and 9 nays, the motion does not prevail and the A1 amendment is not adopted. Next, we'll be taking up the A8 amendment. Who will be offering the A8 amendment? Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This one would require that the Clemency Review Commission issue a minority report to the Pardons Board if the recommendation is not unanimous. And so the idea here is, and again, we're going into uncharted territory here where previously these issues were determined by unanimous decision amongst the governor, the attorney general, and the chief justice, and now we're replacing that process. And instead of it having to be unanimous, it's going to be a majority decision, majority vote. Well, if that's the case, I think it's in the public interest for those of us who are entrusting the government to handle these processes to have some idea of what the dissent was. Especially when we're talking about releasing people back into the community who have the potential to recidivate, having on record what the concern was that motivated somebody to vote against their release is certainly in the public interest. So I would encourage members to vote for this. Thank you.
And I'll be speaking to this amendment as well. I'm going to recommend a no vote for now. However, I think this is something that we can talk about, perhaps continue to work on. I think it's turning it into an adversarial process where it's not necessarily meant to be that way. And the fact that there's somebody that doesn't agree will be known. So for now, I'm going to say no, but that is something that I would be willing to talk to you further about. Further discussions on this amendment? All right. Any closing remarks, Representative Hudson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm not sure I grasp the problem with it being an adversarial process. I mean, we utilize an adversarial process to determine whether or not someone's sentenced in the first place. Utilizing an adversarial process to determine whether or not we're going to release them back into the community makes sense, at least to my current state of mind. Perhaps there's an argument the other way, and I'm certainly open to hearing that. But as it stands, as I stated, I think that it's in the public interest to have this process known and to give folks the opportunity to have confidence in the decisions that are being made. Transparency and sunlight go a long way towards providing that. So I would ask for a roll call.
A roll call has been requested. The clerk will take the roll on the A8 amendment.
Chair Moller,
No.
Vice Chair Feist,
No.
Lead Novotny. Yes. Representative Becker Finn.
Nope.
Representative Curran.
No.
Representative Engen.
Yes.
Representative Frazier.
No.
Representative Grossel. Representative Hollins.
No.
Representative Hudson.
Yes.
Representative Hewitt.
No.
Representative Mueller.
Mueller votes yes.
Representative Pinto.
No.
Representative Tabke.
No.
Representative Whitty.
Yes.
There being 6 ayes and 9 nays, the motion does not prevail and the A8 amendment is not adopted. Next, we'll be taking up the A21 amendment. Oh, you were quick to that. Go ahead, Representative Hudson on the A21.
I had a feeling, Madam Chair. Thank you. Okay, so the A21, this one might be the standout in that I have high hopes that it will actually be accepted. And because what I'm trying to do here is, as I read the bill, and it asks for the Indeterminate Sentence Release Board members to have certain backgrounds, certain experience. My assumption is that the author desires that diversity of background to be reflected in the membership, but the language as it currently exists would allow for the composition of the board to be weighted one way or the other towards a particular background, a particular perspective. And so what this amendment would do is it would say that no more than one member may come from each of the backgrounds listed in that paragraph, and thereby ensure that we're getting the broadest view, the highest number of perspectives possible, as opposed to only seeing the issue from one perspective. So I would encourage members to vote yes, and I'm hopeful that we will.
All right, Representative Tabke to the A21.
Thank you very much, Chair Moller and Representative Hudson for the amendment. We're not going to take it today, but I'll work with you on it, and we'll get it included next.
Right. Yeah, further, and I'll just add to that too, that there's kind of an issue with how the amendment is worded that made it confusing to us in trying to figure out what it was trying to do. But we understand what you're trying to do, and as Representative Tabke said, we're definitely amenable to that change. Just we didn't think the way this was drafted, it made that clear. Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Tabke. And yeah, noodling over what the language should be in order to affect the goal was difficult, and so I'm happy to hear that this is a goal we share, and I'm happy to have a conversation about what that language should look like. So I'll go ahead and withdraw the amendment.
All right, the I've lost number 21 has been withdrawn. Next up, we'll be moving to the A12 amendment. Who will be offering the A12 amendment? Representative Grossel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And the A12 will be expanding the non-affiliation with any kind of hate or extremist groups to all licensed professionals. Looking at the wording of the bill, why are we singling out peace officers when it comes to hate and extremist groups? And we should want all licensed professionals to not associate with hate or extremist groups, of course. My amendment adds doctors, nurses, psychologists, pharmacists, teachers, and a host of other licensed professionals to this prohibition. And yes, it would still include peace officers.
All right, Representative Frazier to the A12 amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Grosso, being a peace officer, taking that solemn oath to protect and serve, it's a very high standard. It's a high calling. It is, and with that high calling, with that responsibility comes desire and the need for great trust, transparency, and accountability. I thought about this, I read this amendment, and I thought about it last night, and I did research, and I could not find anywhere any intelligence agency within this country or any country where there is a conclusion that folks from hateful extremists, violent groups, are trying to infiltrate a particular occupation. And that is what this language addresses. It is to ensure to root that out. It is to ensure that communities know that it is prohibited within that profession that takes that solemn oath. And that's why we have it here. That's why it is particularly focused on this particular profession. And our officers don't need to be coddled. They know that. I've had conversations with officers, and they understand. They understand they don't want these types of individuals or these types of groups associated with them. And that's why the language is drafted the way it is. And also, it is in line with what the Post Board has adopted in their rules process, and it's been vetted by administrative law judges. So I would urge a no vote.
Further discussion to the A12. Representative Mueller.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Frazier. I would want to just say, listening to your words, that the high calling of trust, accountability, and transparency, I can't imagine a better description of teachers.
Further discussion?
Madam Chair.
Yep, Lead Novotny.
Madam Chair, Representative Moller beat me to that thing. I had already written teachers. I can't think of anyone with a...
I'm Mueller.
Representative Mueller beat me to the punch. I can't think of anything with a higher degree of exposure and the ability to shape and influence behavior than teachers. For that, I ask for a yes vote on this amendment, and I believe we'll roll call it.
Great. Representative Becker-Finn.
I just wanted to point out, thank you, Madam Chair, that the difference is that police officers carry guns and sometimes in the line of duty end up killing people. The burden and the weight of that is really important, and I think that if we're talking about trust in the system, I mean, this is really, it's heightened, it's different when we're talking about police officers, and I don't see why anyone would have a problem with making sure that we're holding people to this standard. And I don't know why this is a problem. We don't want these kinds of people out protecting and serving our communities.
Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It seems like there might be a miscommunication here, because I'm hearing from Representative Frazier and from Representative Becker-Finn an argument against an assertion that we're not making. We're not saying that people who are involved in hate groups as defined in the bill, which if I recall, I'm not going to bother to look it up right now, but the key component is advocates for violence, threats, initiating force against people on the basis of biases. Nobody over here is saying we want those people to be police officers. What this amendment is saying is we also don't want them to be teachers or doctors. Police carry guns, doctors carry scalpels. Teachers influence the minds of children. Do we want active hate group members involved in those professions? We're expanding the premise of this bill to demonstrate that it applies across the board to anybody who we regard their profession that they're in as so valuable, so specialized that we go through the trouble of licensing it in order to allow somebody to do the work in this state. If we're gonna, and the licensing process involves vetting. That's the whole point. And so we're just saying include in that vetting process whether or not the person is actively threatening, conspiring to engage in violence for political effect or in order to further an agenda against protected groups. Thank you.
Representative Frazier.
I think we had Rep. Hollis before me.
Oh, sorry. Okay, Representative Hollins.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm hearing what the other side of the table is saying, and I don't think I necessarily disagree with what you're saying, but this is the Public Safety Committee, and we have purview and control over public safety, not education, not medical professionals, right? I mean, this is something that if you would like to clone this bill and this legislative language and take it to education policy or take it to health committee, I would be in favor of that, and I think that's a great idea. But right now, we're talking about the realm of public safety and what we can control within this space. So I think that it makes absolute sense that we're bringing it forward in the space in which we're in control of. Thank you.
Representative Novotny. No? Representative Frazier?
And again, I just want to ground us in the reason that we have, the reason the rules were put in place by the post board and the reason we're codifying it here. We have intelligence, law enforcement intelligence, that says these groups are infiltrating our law enforcement agencies. We don't have law enforcement intelligence saying that they're infiltrating social workers who are licensed, nurses who are licensed, doctors who are licensed, teachers who are licensed, cosmetologists who are licensed. We don't have it for that, but we have it for this, and it goes back decades. And it continues to be concluded and cited. That's what we have. That's why we're here, and that's what we're trying to prevent.
Back to the author of the amendment, Representative Grassel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And you sound like it's just hate is just limited to peace officers, and that's not true or accurate. It can infiltrate any place, and it has infiltrated all places. It's infiltrated judges. It's infiltrated attorneys. It's infiltrated all those places. And being the people that we are, we want that stuff rooted out. Now, again, I will say, peace officers are still included in this amendment. But if we want to have a well-rounded, across the board, let's make sure we're all toeing the mark. There's nothing wrong with this amendment. So I ask for a yes vote and a roll call, please.
A roll call having been requested, the clerk will take the roll on the A12 amendment.
Chair Moller,
No.
Vice Chair Feist,
No.
Lead Novotny,
Yes.
Representative Becker Finn,
Nope.
Representative Curran,
No.
Representative Engen,
Yes.
Representative Frazier,
No.
Representative Grossel,
Yes.
Representative Hollins,
No.
Representative Hudson,
Yes.
Representative Hewitt,
No.
Representative Mueller,
Mueller votes yes.
Representative Pinto,
No.
Representative Tabke,
No.
Representative Whitty.
Yes.
There being 6 ayes and 9 nays, the motion does not prevail and the A12 amendment is not adopted. Next, we'll take up the A10 amendment. Who will be offering the A10? Representative Mueller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Moller. I don't know why that's so hard. Thank you so much. So this amendment would look at the language that was talking about missing and murdered the Indigenous girls and make sure that we also include our males. We heard so many different stories about how it's not just exclusive to females. And so we want to make sure that we are including both genders here to make sure that justice is served for each person. Thank you.
Representative Curran to the A10.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Representative Mueller. And I'm gonna encourage folks to vote yes on this amendment. I've spoken with the author of this bill, and it certainly was no intention to leave anybody in the Indigenous community out. There is, of course, we know there's a focus on trying to combat gender-based discrimination and violence. However, no intention to leave out boys. So I'm encouraging a yes vote on this amendment.
Any further discussion to the A10? Representative Mueller.
And thank you so much, Madam Chair and Representative Curran, and thank you for the friendly amendment.
All right. All those in favor of the A10 amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion prevails and the A10 amendment is adopted. Next, we're going to take up the A16 amendment. Who's going to be offering that? Representative Ingen.
Thank you, Chair Moller. And the A16 amendment, we're going to be looking at post-sentencing release. We're going to be doing some evaluations on that. And right now we have nonprofits that are engaging in paying bail, posting that for defendants, and that can really skew studies. That can really skew data that we're trying to collect here. So nonprofits that pay bail must cease doing so while the pretrial release study is being conducted. That's all that this amendment does, and I would urge a yes vote on it.
Representative Pinto to the A16.
Thank you, Chair Moller, and thanks, Representative Engen. I guess I'm a little bit confused about what you're talking about causing problems with the study. I think the study will go on, and based on what's happening in Minnesota, it'll be really important to have that information. I am concerned that the amendment itself, though, feels potentially pretty blatantly unconstitutional. Would be a concern that I would have. Organizations may provide bail depending on their kind of the way in which they're formed. If they're organizations that are for profit, they can do so. If they're not profit, they cannot. And members, it seems to me that we just want to have a study to be conducted and how things are working in our state, and there's no reason to adopt this and a number of reasons not to. So I'd urge a no vote. Thank you.
Further discussion to the A16. Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Representative Engen could speak for himself, but I would guess that the intention here is to actually ensure the integrity of the study's results. So as I understand it, the intention of the study is to analyze the impact of the current system on different demographics, different communities, people in different socioeconomic statuses. What are the impacts? And I'm trying to understand how the current system works. You're not going to be able to do that in an environment where you have an organized effort to disrupt the current system, which is what we're seeing here in the state of Minnesota, where you have groups that are going out of their way to post bail for folks who, by the virtue of the fact that the organization exists, presumably would not be able to pay for it on their own. And so I don't think you're going to get from your study the data that you're hoping for or expecting or desiring if you've got somebody with their thumb on the scale. And as far as it being a nonprofit as opposed to for-profit, I imagine that that's something that we could account for in the language at some point further down the line. But the underlying premise that we shouldn't have organizations putting their thumb on the scale of our bail process while we're trying to study it to see whether or not it's working, I think is a sound premise.
Representative Pinto.
Thanks. If I'm understanding the logic, you're saying that in order to study the current system, we need to change the current system during the study. which does not make any sense to me. So we're studying the current system, and if this were to be expanded to prohibit for-profit organizations from providing bail, that would obviously be an even greater change in the current system. So we're studying the system. Makes no sense to change the system while the system is being studied. Let's study the system. And in any case, as I say, I think this would be challenged successfully as violating our Constitution as well. Thanks.
Further discussion to the A16? The author of the amendment, Representative Ingan.
Thank you, Chair Moller, and thank you, Representative Pinto. I'll withdraw the amendment. I do think, though, that while we're evaluating how the systems currently work, we should be factoring in some other extenuating circumstances, such as organizations that are quite possibly acting in not in the interest of public safety. I'm actually going to read here a CNN article. Bailed out, arrested again. These charities boomed after the murder of George Floyd. They're under fire for bailing out violent offenders. It talks about how particular entities like the Minnesota Freedom Fund are acting outside of what is within the realm of public safety. And we shouldn't be taking that lightly, so I hope that we can discuss this off the record. But I appreciate the conversation here.
The A16 amendment has been withdrawn. Moving now to the A15. Who will be offering the A15? Representative Ingan.
Thank you, Chair. So nonprofit recipients of community crime and violence prevention grants, this just allows, or mandates that they have a non-state match and in-kind contributions that must be time card tracked. Now, the reason that we're doing that is because having worked at a nonprofit, we saw folks in the nonprofit sector that really did great work, and they tracked what they did. They were transparent about their time, about their billable hour rates. But then we also saw some that were definitely not always so transparent and were able to fudge numbers just enough to make it seem like they were doing more than what they really were. So this just makes sure that we have a full and accurate depiction as to the work that they're conducting, and that's what I'd urge members to support this.
Representative Frazier to the A15.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Ingan. You know, I thought about this amendment, and it reminded me of the pull yourselves up like a bootstrap term, and was often applied to folks that didn't even have boots to pull up. So, you know, I hate that we even have to have a bill that does these type of investments. But the reality is, historically, we haven't invested in particular communities, so we have these types of situations here. And the idea is to provide resources for organizations. Many of these organizations, they're doing the work now. They're doing them on shoestring budgets, or they're just volunteering to do the work. We're trying to give them resources so they can expand, and they can be sustainable, and they can continue to do the work that is helping to make communities safe. So I'm going to urge a no vote on this, because I actually think it does a disservice to these organizations to mandate for them to do something that I think would be a barrier to them to continue to do the work. So I'd urge a no vote on this, members.
Further discussion, Lead Novotny.
Thank you, Chair Moller. I agree with most of what you said, Representative Frazier. It is good, and I'd like to direct you back. We're not against anyone pulling themselves up. We're all for that. We have more than enough money going to nonprofits, in this particular provisions of the bill has the potential to do good work. We just want to make sure that there's a little documentation and a little data being collected. This is not overwhelming, it's not onerous, it's just a simple documentation when we're talking about something that is a match, and making sure that the state gets a fair contribution, and that the people and organizations that are doing this have a real stake in the matter. That's my take on this, and I request a yes vote.
And I'll just note too, it is more than just data collection here, because it requires them to have a match in an equal amount from non-state funds. And I do know that OJP does do a lot of data collection, and I'm interested in having a discussion with them about, some of that data that they collect, and maybe they do take some of this into account, or at least ask those who are applying. So I think that there is some value in having that data. But the problem, I think, with this is that it's requiring a certain match. Further discussion to the A15. The author of the amendment, Representative Ingen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to the point of match, what we don't want to do is hamstring these organizations which are doing great work from being able to apply for these funds. We don't want to do that. But a lot of them, like you said, they're volunteering their time. A lot of it they're working on shoestring budgets, I think, as you proclaimed, and that might be true. We want to make sure that we know who the great organizations are, who are acting in good faith to make sure that we are investing in historically underserved communities. But we also want to know if there are bad actors that are using these funds with way too much leniency and discretion. That's what I think this does. And that in-kind match of time that's highlighted under this amendment, it allows them to say, look, this volunteer work that we have been doing, now we're gonna be able to put a monetary value to it and have that be the match. So that's why I'm still urging a yes on this amendment. Thank you.
All right, all those in favor of the A15 amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. The motion does not prevail and the A15 amendment is not adopted. The next amendment we're going to take up is the A14 amendment. Who will be offering the A14 amendment? Representative Ingen.
Thank you, Chair Moller. The A14 amendment requires syringe service providers to provide clients with educational materials on overdose prevention and substance use disorder treatment. Representative Hollins, I believe, did you offer this bill? It was Gomez. I apologize. I believe that when we had heard a bill for syringe service providers, we were talking about the great work that these advocates are doing for folks struggling with substance abuse disorder. We just want to make sure that they have the resources and then that they are handing out those resources for folks who are suffering. That's what this amendment does. It's pretty straightforward. Those pamphlets or directing folks towards agencies that do great work in helping people become whole after addiction, yeah, they should have that at a bare minimum if they're going to be providing syringes. So that's what this does. And I would urge a yes vote and request a roll call.
All right, very well. I'm going to speak to this amendment, and I'm going to recommend a no vote on this, in part because of how it's worded, and also just wanted to point out that the bill language itself in the DE also amends the definition of syringe service providers who are providing this harm reduction services, including educating participants and others about overdose, offering referrals for substance use treatment, disorder treatment, for referrals to medical treatment and services, mental health program services, and other social services. So they are doing this work, but I just think the way that this is worded and the requirement and how it's worded, it kind of creates a problem for the way they do their work. So for that reason, I'll be requesting members to vote no. Further discussion on the A14? All right. The author of the amendment, Representative Ingen.
Thank you, Chair Moller. I'll withdraw that. If that's already going to be listed in the DE, as you said, then let's allow these folks to do the great work that they're going to do. But I think it should be highlighted that the education piece is really where this all comes together. So thank you.
Thank you. The next amendment is going to be the A13 amendment. Who will be offering the A13 amendment? Representative Ingen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The A13 deletes the repeal of drug paraphernalia prohibition law. Drug paraphernalia law is much broader than just syringes. So if the goal is to decriminalize syringes that people use to take drugs, those exceptions are already contained in House File 2041. So I would request a yes vote on this amendment.
All right, and I will be also talking to the A13 amendment. And, as we talked about the fentanyl crisis in our committee, and we devoted a lot of time talking about that, and I worked very closely with Representative Baker on that language, but also recognizing the public health crisis that we have with substance use disorder. frankly, with many different substances. And this was really important to me and to our members that we recognize the public health nature of it. And part of that was recognizing that criminalizing possession of drug paraphernalia just was sort of contrary to that notion of the public health crisis that we're having right now. And so I'm going to be recommending a no vote on this amendment. Further discussion on the A13? Lead Novotny.
Thank you, Chair Moller. I would counter that. Part of the problem, and we've talked about this before, is that what these people need is to have a consequence and hit rock bottom. One of the ways that consequences can find the people that need this help so desperately is that there might be a law enforcement intervention. Seeing this paraphernalia in a vehicle, seeing this paraphernalia in a home that you're on a different visit might be the way that they can come in contact that would get them into the court system and get them on the road to recovery. It's just a different approach. We all want the same thing. We want people to not be suffering from substance abuse. And just our side sees this as more enabling, and I encourage yes vote.
Representative Pinto.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Lead Novotny, for the acknowledgments. I think it's right. Like, I've handled many cases, charged many cases as a prosecutor where there's paraphernalia in a car, and people are not in great shape, right? They're on a bad path. What I'm excited about is the opportunity for us not just to have a criminal justice response to that situation. We have the study that we've included in the bill, Chair Moller's included, and in the meantime, I think we need to recognize that that having a criminal justice response to that situation is probably not going to be the best thing for folks. And I appreciate you acknowledging that, in fact, we have to have a broader perspective on it. And I would urge a no vote on the amendment. I think we want to be getting away from this with respect to drug paraphernalia. I think we want to be thinking more broadly about this issue, and recognizing that that there's probably better ways to help people than having simply a criminal justice approach to this issue. Thanks.
Lead Novotny.
Thank you, Chair Moller, and thank you for the response. And Representative Pinto, I agree with you, but you kept saying using just the response. We're not saying this is just the response. This is one of a multi-faceted response, and you're taking away a leg of the stool by taking this off the table. And think of all the probable cause that has been developed that led to someone getting the help they need. And this is, in a majority of the time, this is the help or the push or the nudge that gets them to where they need to be. And now we're taking that away. I just think we're going the wrong direction. Ramsey County, we've got the drug courts to help these people. It's not a punitive. We don't want to wreck their lives. We want them to get better. And that is all started with the first step. And in many cases, you are taking away the first step by taking away these signs that gives you the ability to do a more thorough investigation and develop a better case that can get the person the help they need. I don't think by lowering the standards, we're helping anyone. Thank you, Chair.
Representative Curran.
Thank you, Chair. And I appreciate this discussion. I just wanted to put a note that, yes, we are, this bill is broader on purpose, recognizing that I know Chair Gomez had mentioned in the presentation of this bill that we're recognizing the steps that people take in their journey through recovery and treatment. So, when we're talking about folks who might be using a substance with a syringe, that a downgrade from that could include something that is drug paraphernalia. And we don't want to penalize people for having a substance use disorder that they may be actively battling or, taking other measures to try to combat. And I liken this to, when we look at criminalizing things like homelessness and mental illness, we know that people land in prison based on those things. And I don't see I don't see, as, to Chair Pinto's point, that that criminalization is necessarily the best way. And while we might intend for folks to get treatment for being arrested while having drug paraphernalia, we know that oftentimes it's a path to prison, and we're not offering a free ride to treatment. So oftentimes it really does just land in the criminal justice realm. So I also encourage a no vote.
Representative Whitty.
Thank you, Chair Moller, and I do appreciate the conversation. I'm just going to piggyback a little bit off of Representative Novotny. There's a lot of times when law enforcement comes across something, they're the first people that have hands on this. And it could be referred back to the probation officer, or it could be brought to the courts. And I've worked with the prosecutors before. I assume you have, Representative Pinto, worked with the cops and used it as a way not to maybe bring it into the criminal justice realm, but also to get the help. And you have the resources and the tools to do it. And if it happens out on the street, the officers might not have all those tools. And then it goes by the wayside and it's in a report. So I do like the connection, because I do like working with our prosecutors. They know what's best for helping out the community, but it takes that opportunity to work together and find those connections within the community. Thank you.
Representative Becker-Finn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's nothing to prevent officers from offering that help and making those phone calls without arresting someone or putting things through the criminal justice process. There's nothing stopping them from offering that help as it is, without there being some kind of new charge and arrest.
Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the point on our side is that an offer might not be what somebody needs. They might need to face the hard fact that they've crossed a line that requires intervention. And so what this amendment does is it provides law enforcement with the tool to make that intervention and to not put it on offer, but say you're on a path that is destructive and is not going to end well, and put them in a position where they feel that squeeze to accept the offer once the offer is made. Thank you.
Back to the author of the amendment, Representative Ingen.
Thank you, Chair Moller, and thank you for the discussion, members. I think where we're drawing a contrast is that we believe law enforcement officers have the ability to recognize when somebody needs help. Representative Whitty, Representative Grossell, Lead Novotny, I know you guys have experience with this, and you've shared stories where you were that interaction that turned a life around. But a simple offer might not be taken up. It's not an immediate ride to prison. And I think that some of my colleagues here, you guys are under the assumption that it's just an immediate prison sentence, and that's not what we're trying to do here. I would request a roll call on this and hope that we can pass this amendment. Thank you.
Roll call has been requested. The clerk will take the roll on the A13 amendment.
Chair Moller?
No.
Vice Chair Feist?
No.
Lead Novotny?
Yes.
Representative Becker-Finn?
Nope.
Representative Curran?
No.
Representative Engen?
Yes.
Representative Frazier?
No.
Representative Grossell?
Yes.
Representative Hollins?
No.
Representative Hudson?
Yes.
Representative Hewitt?
No.
Representative Mueller?
Mueller votes yes.
Representative Pinto?
No.
Representative Tabke?
No.
Representative Whitty?
Yes.
There being 6 ayes and 9 nays, the motion does not prevail and the A13 amendment is not adopted. Next, we'll be taking up the A19 amendment. Who will be offering that?
That'll be me, Chair Moller.
Lead Novotny.
Realizing that we are getting close on time, I'll be very brief. My amendment would just say that the syringes that are distributed through these services and funded by the state of Minnesota be clearly labeled with the following: provided by the state of Minnesota pursuant to House File 2041. I think there's going to be people that are finding piles of needles or their children stepping on a needle. I think they need and deserve to know where those needles came from. I recommend a yes vote.
And I'm going to speak to that, and I'll be brief. I'm going to recommend a no vote. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor of the A19 amendment signify by saying aye. Opposed? No. The motion does not prevail and the A19 amendment is not adopted. The next amendment we're going to move to is the A5 amendment. Who will be offering the A5 amendment? Anyone?
Chair Moller.
Lead Novotny.
The bill takes out the provisions from the red flag laws and the transfer laws, and we'd like to see these as standalone bills. It also deletes the appropriations related to these articles to the BCA and the courts. I think the people of this state deserve to know where people stand on this order and not have it in the omnibus bill. It should be standalone, and I would recommend a yes vote and request a roll call.
Representative Pinto to the A5 amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the people of Minnesota want to have common sense gun legislation. They want us to do more to keep guns out of the hands of people who've shown themselves to be dangerous, and they want us to do that every possible way that we can. That means through sending individual bills out of this committee, which we've done, and that means having bills that relate to public safety be with other bills relating to public safety. And I would urge a no vote, members.
Further discussion to the A5 amendment. Lead Novotny.
Thank you, Chair Moller. We also want common sense gun regulation. We also want common sense public safety rulings to be and laws to be done that actually will respond to the public safety and violence crisis that is affecting this state. We would like to work with you on that. We have bills that we believe would do that. Very little or none of the problems that are being used as the examples that we're trying to solve would be solved by these measures. Thank you, Chair, and if I didn't already, I request a roll call.
A roll call has been requested. The clerk will take a roll on the A5 amendment.
Chair Moller,
No.
Vice Chair Feist,
No.
Lead Novotny. Yes. Representative Becker Finn. Nope. Representative Curran.
No.
Representative Engen.
Yes.
Representative Frazier.
No.
Representative Grossel.
Yes.
Representative Hollins. Excused. Representative Hudson.
Yes.
Representative Hewitt.
No.
Representative Mueller.
Mueller votes yes.
Representative Pinto.
No.
Representative Tapke.
No.
Representative Whitty.
Yes.
There being 6 ayes and 8 nays, the motion does not prevail and the A5 amendment is not adopted. We are on our last amendment, the A7 amendment. Who will be offering that? Representative Whitty.
Thank you, Chair Moller. Red flag law sunsets in 5 years if the state suicide rate doesn't drop. In the 19 states that have red flag laws, the suicide rate has increased in every state except Nevada, which enacted their red flag law in 2019, and the suicide rate was already declining. If a person is in crisis and wants to die by suicide and a gun is not available, the person will find another means. The red flag bill will do nothing to reduce suicides.
To the A7, Representative Frazier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Whitty, I do always appreciate your amendments. I'm actually going to ask for a no vote on this, but I'm going to tell you why. One, we're focused on suicide by firearms, so this doesn't address that. It addresses suicides across the board, and it's consistent with one of the advocates or one of the opponents of these common sense gun safety bills, where they stated that suicide has gone up everywhere. That's a fact. That's true. But when you drill down in states that have ERPO laws, suicide by firearms have gone down in those states. 76% of gun deaths in Minnesota are by firearm suicide, right? And that's what we're trying to get at. So I'm going to ask for a no vote on this. I think this bill is targeted in a way that it will help address those suicide by firearms. And this is about helping save lives and helping some of these communities that have been really hard hit by these suicide by firearms. So I would urge a no vote.
Further discussion on the A7, Lead Novotny.
Thank you, Chair Moller. Just want to counter. If we looked at the statistics from Canada when they had a substantial reduction in their gun numbers. They had gun turn-ins. The suicide numbers didn't change. Some provinces, they went up, and they just went up by hangings. And that was the most common to go from there. I will tell you, and the rest of the members on our board that have dealt with this, that if someone wants to commit suicide, there's an endless amount of ways they can do this. The suicide angle of this was one of the main reasons it was pointed to. If we go to the overall scope of this bill, if you really want to save suicides, we need to get them into help, and we get them into a place where they are getting treatment, not just taking away their guns. We want them to get the help, extended help, not just a 72-hour hold that we all know is a lot less than 72 hours, and most of the time they're turned around and they're released before the ambulance is back in the barn. Thank you, Chair.
Chair Becker-Finn.
Thank you, Chair Moller. Just want to point out that the ERPL provisions would protect more people, would save more lives just than those that are impacted by suicide. Thank you.
Back to the author of the amendment, Representative Whitty.
Thank you for the discussion. I just request a roll call vote, and hopefully we can talk more about this, because I think we can't always go to politics of this and really look at some multifaceted, common sense approach to this. Thank you.
A roll call has been requested. The clerk will take the roll on the A7 amendment.
Chair Moller,
No.
Vice Chair Feiss,
No.
Lead Novotny, Representative Becker-Finn,
No.
Representative Curran,
No.
Representative Engen, Representative Frazier,
No.
Representative Grossel,
Yes.
Representative Hollins,
No.
Representative Hudson,
Yes.
Representative Hewitt,
No.
Representative Mueller,
Mueller votes yes.
Representative Pinto,
No.
Representative Tabke,
No.
Representative Whitty.
Yes.
There being 6 ayes and 9 nays, the motion does not prevail, and the A7 amendment is not adopted. All right, members, we made it through all the amendments, and now we will move on to member discussion of the DE1 amendment as amended. Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know we're short on time, so I'll be much more concise than I otherwise would have been.
Thank you.
So what I see here, the experience of working on this committee, first of all, thank everybody, members, staff, the public. This has been a fantastic experience. And for me, it's opened up the opportunity to learn the perspective on the other side of the table. And what I see is that, you know, we all come in here, we talk a lot about bias, we talk a lot about the lenses that people view the world through, and that's a real thing. And I've been trying to check mine by embracing ideas that are under this umbrella of restorative justice. And I think the bias on our side that has kept us from being able to see the benefits of those things is the certain assumptions about why people do things, and missing the fact that there are other factors that can influence why people make bad decisions other than them just being bad people. What I hope going forward is that there's an opportunity to entertain our perspective as well, and that perhaps there'll be some discovery that when you make a similar assumption about the people who we entrust to protect us, that anything bad that happens in the sphere of law enforcement must be informed by some sort of malice. And you know, I'll refrain from going deeper into that, but our biases place blinders, and from one side of the table, you know, you can peek around your blinder and discover something that you didn't see before. I feel like that's something that I'm starting to do, and I would encourage you to try to do the same, because you're taking good steps here in trying to take a more comprehensive approach to how we deal with violations of the public trust and violations of individual rights. But it's weighed very heavily in favor of the assumption that everyone wants to be a good person. And that's just not true. There is a certain segment of the population, however small, that's going to keep doing it again and again and again and again, no matter how well you treat them. And what this bill is missing is focusing in on that and including that, recognition of that, and prioritizing protecting the public from that. And the only other thing I'll throw in is, the inclusion of the gun legislation here, I think, is a fairly unsophisticated approach to a complex problem, which is ironic given what I just said about your overall approach to criminal justice. In criminal justice, public safety, you're recognizing that there are all these extenuating factors that play into why somebody makes a decision. But then when it comes to guns, all of a sudden we throw all that out the window and just focus on the evil talisman of the object that's causing bad things to happen. And there's a dichotomy there that, or a dissonance there that I hope could be the subject of discussion in the future. Thank you.
Chair Becker-Finn.
Thank you, Chair Moller. And first, I just wanted to thank the staff and pages. That is the most efficient I have been able to go through amendments in the markup of a bill maybe ever. So whoever made sure those were all in the right order so we weren't all frantic trying to find the right amendment, thank you for that. And I just wanted to thank you for this bill. It's a good bill. It is a sophisticated bill. I think it's comprehensive. There really are some things that we've been talking about for a long time that are finally addressed in this bill. Whether it's in the correction space, whether it's how we interact with our sovereign tribal nations, investments, and all kinds of things that are incredibly important. And we don't talk a lot about this publicly as legislators, but it's also really gratifying to have someone who was your vice chair go on to be a chair and really do the difficult, hard work of putting together a really good bill. And so I just want to thank you for your leadership. And I know the work that you always put into your bills, and this bill was no different. And I really appreciate this and am excited to vote for it and move it forward. So thank you, Chair Moller.
Thank you. Wow, I'm getting emotional now. Appreciate it. Lead Novotny.
And thank you, Chair Moller. And I would just like to recognize the staff and you for bringing this forward and for staying true to the pledge that we made to each other, that the stuff that we can agree on and needs to be done and benefits the public, that we agree on that. And we have respectfully disagreed on the things we disagree, and I appreciate your leadership in that. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. And I'll just throw in my closing comments too to everybody on this committee. From the time we met individually, each and every one of you, and learned about the things that you cared most about, and finding out how much common ground we have. And we may have different ways of how we approach those things, but I genuinely believe that every person on this committee came to this with good intentions. And so thank you so much for that. Also want to shout out to our nonpartisan staff for the incredible amount of work that they did. And then our researchers, Zach and John, great work working with both of you. Really appreciate your efforts. I know Farheen couldn't be here today and he regrets it, but a fabulous job to Jack for stepping in, or Alex, sorry, with all the for stepping in with all the amendments and everything else that we had to do. And to all the people who've been coming to the committee, sharing their stories with us, the topics that we cover in this committee are very heavy and very difficult. And we're so grateful for all the many people who show up to either share their experiences with us or just show up in the audience as well. So thank you to the public for that. We do need to go ahead and move the bill out, so I don't want to forget to do that. All right, so I will move adoption of the DE1 amendment as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. The motion prevails and the DE1 amendment as amended is adopted. And then I will renew my motion that House File 2890 as amended be re-referred to the Committee on Ways and Means and direct staff to make any technical corrections that are needed. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. The motion prevails. All right, and with that, members, we are adjourned.